Good day to all, and it's me again with our next and important session on QMS. Did I just mention important? Oh yes, I did. And I use that adjective is because in this tape, we are going to get to know our own QMS manual in detail, which eventually will form as the framework for preparing our project QA/QC plan with the guidance of the senior engineers for all future projects. Initially, the plan was to invite all personnel once again for the briefing like done for the earlier QMS session, but then considering the availability of personnel, duration and few other aspects, we felt it's much better to send a video link that could be accessed by all. So that's how the idea to come up with this tape popped out. More importantly, in that way we also make sure that the internal QMS guidelines have been communicated to all personnel and process owners and that everyone is aware of the company's quality policies and objectives. Before we get into detail with our own QMS manual, a small recap on what was discussed during the earlier QMS session. As planned, we didn't start due to some unforeseen circumstance, and the presentation took off around 11 hours with an opening note by the HOD of the operations and then the introduction by the presenter himself. Things kicked off with a briefing on quality and then the quality management system, under which QMS processes, procedures and responsibilities were discussed. Then the attendees were made aware of the quality policies, and after which the importance of having departmental objectives were briefed. The PDCA chart was considered towards the end of the presentation, following which the pros and cons argument began under the presence of the project manager. HSE briefing was also done during the presentation by the HSE supervisor, who will also not be named on copyright grounds. And that was day one to those who couldn't make it to the presentation. Now for this session, as told earlier, we will look in detail our own quality management system manual, which has been prepared in accordance to the ISO 9001-2015 requirements. Assuming the audience question, why ISO 9001-2015 while ISO 9001-2008 is still around? Well, ISO 9001-2008 is already an outdated version, and the versions keep changing after every 7 years. So the current version is ISO 9001-2015. The companies that are under the influence of the earlier standard have a transition period of 3 years to implement the current standard, which means after 2018, the ISO 9001-2008 becomes completely obsolete and invalid. Now for the differences between the two standards. But before we look on the differences, I would like to highlight that this presentation has been prepared on a WWH basis, where WWH stands for what, why and how questions respectively, and it would be asked as applicable for all our QMS clauses. We figured this as one way to make this tape more of an information sharing session than being a boring lecture. So for the differences between the two standards, firstly, we have to understand that the topics that are essential to meet the QMS criteria are covered both in the old and the new version, because the basic concepts starting with the management up to the non-conformity are common in both the standards. The real difference is in the structure, where in ISO 9001-2008 there are about 5 main sections, while in the ISO 9001-2015 there are 7 main sections. This is because the new standard uses a template known as the Annex SL, where the term Annex is the same Annex we all know. SL is not any abbreviated term, so both together it's Annex SL and it is simply a serial number. Now let's ask the first question, what? What is Annex SL? There are so many management system standards published by ISO, roughly about 21,000 standards, and this figure is as of 2016. although all those standards shared common elements, the structure differed from one another, and this led to confusion and difficulties at the time of implementation, especially when a company is expected to follow multiple standards. So probably all the international bodies sat for a chat and thought of introducing one common structure and core text, which they did, if not for all, at least for the primary standards, and named it as the Annex SL template. Now the next question, why? Why Annex SL? This question has been pretty much answered under the question what, and I don't mind answering again. So Annex SL has been introduced mainly because it is a high-level structure with 10 different clauses. All future standards and those to be revised in future will follow the same template. In that way, companies that are implementing multiple standards avoid difficulties and confusions. In our case, we have the one for quality, then health and safety, and then the environmental management. Totally 3 standards, and that is a very good news compared to the 21,000 plus standards. 21,000, huh? No wonder why they came up with a game called Angry Bird. Now for the final question, how? How Annex SL? If everything went per plan, then a copy of our QMS file should have reached the recipient of this video link by now. If not, you should receive them shortly. If you don't receive them, please write to my email ID. In that file, under tab 1, you should see our QMS manual, and that is the answer to the question how. Our QMS manual is also prepared using the same Annex SL template, and we can stop worrying about the format for the next decade or until the ISO committee come up with something new. Let's hope they won't do that. Now as you scroll the document, the first 8 pages are the document info section, where you have the cover page, the revision history, the table of contents, abbreviations, and finally the terms and definitions. Following that, we have clause 1, company profile and address. Let's ask the first question, what? A company profile, as we all know, is a CV of every business. A professional introduction on who we are, what we do, and how good we are in doing what we do best. The next question, why? Well, although it's not easy to summarize information about our organization's business activities, history, resources, and capability in just 2 pages, we still manage to input minimal information in order to provide an overview of a company to the clients. The question how is not applicable here. And so we move on to clause number 2, organization chart. I'm sure everyone is aware of it already. Still, an organization chart is a diagram that displays a reporting or relationship ladder between different people, jobs, and departments within an organization. Why? To answer that question, I had to stick to what I told during the first presentation, where it was conveyed to the delegates that a quality auditor will look for the company's organization chart first, and while visiting the site, he or she will look for the project organization chart. A special mention that it is also one of the ISO requirements. The importance of an organogram is it shows the responsibilities and reporting relationships for employees to better understand how their work fits into the organization's overall scheme, and more importantly, it improves lines of communication. For the question how, I have a standard template for the project organization chart prepared by our senior engineer, so we can either use the same or I leave it to the audience to propose something better, noting that the project organization chart should clearly state the name, designation, and contact number up to the supervision level. For other tradesmen, the quantity alone shall be mentioned, and in case of double shift, then the resources must be shown for both the shifts separately. The format I have shall be sent to the respective site in charge at the time of implementation. Clause number 3, quality policy. During the earlier QMS briefing, we all agreed that quality is nothing but a degree of excellence, right? So in order to achieve excellence, it is very important to be a Superman, which is not possible because the Superman's outfit itself is against the natural way of dressing. So in order to achieve excellence from a quality perspective, for all employees within the organization, the management laid rules and documented it as the company's quality policy. Now, why do we need the quality policy? We need it because a quality policy provides top management's vision on quality management for the organization. Moreover, it provides the organization with focused direction towards high-level goals and objectives for quality management. To answer the question how, please turn to page 12 of our QMS manual, where the audience can find our company's quality policy. Be sure to glance through and make sure to communicate to all personnel designated to achieve our one common goal. Clause number 4. Quality objectives. Quality objectives are nothing but a goal or target. In fact, the quality objectives wouldn't exist if quality policies aren't there, because the policies set forth is what more or less ends up as the quality objectives, bearing in mind the customer requirements. Now, why do we need? Because quality objectives are very essential to measure the performance of products, processes, customer satisfaction, suppliers, use of resources, and the overall performance and effectiveness of the quality management system. And therefore, quality objectives can be established for all QMS processes, departments, and departments. I repeated department twice is because I wanted to emphasize the importance of departmental objectives. Because the quality objectives doesn't stop with quality department alone, and it's never complete without the involvement of other departments that adds value and contribute to customer and organizational objectives. Now, how are we going to go about this? Well, there is a form available referenced as form number 20, and upon approval by the management, it shall be sent to all process owners and departments for implementation. While preparing the objectives, make sure that the objectives are measurable, time-oriented, and doesn't deviate from the company's quality policy. Clause number 5. Scope. I think the content itself is self-explanatory and doesn't require any further explanation. But take a note of the statement, there are no exclusions to the requirements of the international standard. What does this mean? For example, assume that we do not carry out the design works and always execute the piling works using the client's design only. Then, clause 12.3 of our QMS manual, design and development of products can be excluded. Another example, assume that we do not use customer property like the construction materials, at times their equipment, and so on. Then clause 12.5.3, property belonging to customers or external providers can be excluded. Both these examples will remain as examples only, since our mode of business doesn't allow for any exclusion within the international standard requirements. Clause number 6. Normative reference. Again, there is nothing much to discuss on this topic and are just references of the documents considered while producing our QMS manual. So jumping to clause number 7, approval, amendment procedure, and distribution. This clause reveals the approval authority of our QMS manual, the procedure to be followed while amending the manual, and the control measures to be applied while distributing the manual. Simple as that. In that clause, we have also included the PDCA chart for easy reference. Clause number 8. Context of the organization. This is a new requirement where we are expected to understand our organization's context before we establish our QMS. Here, the fancy word context can also be read as background and environment. When ISO asks us to understand our organization's context, it wants us to consider the external and internal issues that are relevant to our organization's purpose and strategic direction, and to think about the influence these issues could have on our QMS and the results it intends to achieve. This means that we need to understand our organization's external environment, its culture, its values, its performance, and its interested parties before we develop our QMS. Why? Because our QMS should be able to manage all of these external and internal influences. Once we understand the external and internal issues, then the infos we gather could be used as a special insight to help us define the scope of our QMS and the challenges it must deal with. How? During an audit, there are 5 major documents the auditor will look for in order to fulfill this requirement. The first would be the business plan of our organization. Next, it would be the SWOT analysis, then the minutes of the management review meeting, the stakeholder analysis, and then a risk register. To be completely honest with you all, I'm still stuck with this business plan because for me, it's too much to fit into my head. The structure of a business plan, the amount of field work, all that analysis to be done, and all that very many things I don't know but need to be considered before preparing a business plan was too much. So whenever the auditor looks for the business plan, I just show him our company's profile. And after a lengthy yes and no argument, the topic usually ends with a random result. But guess what? We can still win the argument if we have the other 4 documents in place, starting with a SWOT analysis, a form in which we list our strength, weakness, opportunity, and threat, thus helping ourselves to address our internal and our external issues. The next is the minutes of the management review meeting, then the stakeholder analysis, and finally the risk register that summarizes all the risks covered in the other 3 forms. Clause number 9. Leadership. The clause leadership is not something new to the standard. Compared to the previous ISO 9001-2008 version, it's only the title that has changed but not the requirement. If we look at the first subsection, it is about the ways the top management needs to demonstrate leadership and commitment with respect to the QMS, such as being accountable for the effectiveness of QMS, resource availability, establishment of quality policies and objectives, making sure there is no any communication problem, setting up awareness campaign, promoting continual improvement, and so on. The other subsection deals with customer focus, communicating the established quality policies and the organization's roles, responsibilities, and authorities. Why? It's hard to deny the importance of leadership, and that's why leadership is one of the 7 quality management principles. Without leadership, the QMS is sure to run into trouble. How? Quality policy has to be established, done and available in page number 12 of our QMS manual. Quality objectives has to be prepared. A form is available and upon approval by the management, it will be sent to each department. Management review meetings to be conducted on a periodical basis, which can happen as approved or agreed by the management. The forms are also available to record the minutes. Resource allotment. Carrying out customer satisfaction survey. Forms are ready for implementation, and upon approval by the management, it shall be sent to the project in charge for evaluation purpose. Carrying out of internal audits. This activity has already commenced. And finally, the risk register we were talking about during the previous clause has to be in place in order to fulfill the leadership criteria. Clause number 10. Planning. What is planning? Why do we plan? How to plan? That's ABC. Looking at the subsections, again it's risks, which is a new clause compared to the earlier version, quality objectives, and the plan to achieve them, and planning of changes. For risks, I already said above that we do have a risk register and the format of which I stole from our HSE supervisor. Next is quality objectives. We already discussed above. Planning to achieve the quality objectives. This is when we have to turn to WWWH mode. But only this time, the questions would be different. What will be done to achieve the quality objectives? What resources will be required? Who will be responsible? When it will be completed? And how the results will be evaluated. The clause planning of changes talks about carrying out the changes in a planned manner, be it for the processes, procedures, or the system itself, without affecting the integrity of the quality management system. Clause number 11. Support. In a simple statement, support is the assistance required to get things done. Here, the audience attention is drawn to the sequence of the previous 3 clauses, where under clause 8 we had the context of the organization that talks about business plan, a strategic direction towards fulfilling QMS criteria. Then under clause 9 we saw the leadership commitments towards fulfilling QMS criteria. Then it was planning as clause 10, and under which we saw the WWWH questions in order to achieve the QMS criteria. And now under clause 11 we are going to take a look at the support needed to meet our QMS criteria. This clause has about 5 subsections: resources, competence, awareness, communication, and documented information. The first under the resources column is the people. After that we have the infrastructure, equipment, environmental factors, monitoring and measuring of resources, and organizational knowledge. As the audience glanced through the manual, it can be understood that this section demonstrates how the management provide the human resources necessary for the effective operation of the QMS, then the necessary infrastructure. It also addresses the need for well-maintained equipment, the need for a safe work environment, the need for monitoring and measuring of resources, and the need for communicating organizational knowledge. Subsection 11.2 talks about the competency of personnel and training need analysis, while 11.3 and 11.4 is about awareness and communication respectively. The topics which we have already discussed under a different heading. Subsection 11.5 is about documents and handling of documents. I don't want to discuss on this because we are in the verge of finalizing a more detailed document procedure, and once that's available, it will be sent to the respective process owners. Why? Why on earth would I try to ask and answer that question when I already defined that support is the assistance required to get things done? So moving on to how, well, there are certain forms related to resources, and upon approval, the same shall be used for implementation purpose. That's all I can say for now. Clause number 12. Operations. What is operation? This is the doing part of our business. All that we do from the receipt of an inquiry from the client up to the completion of any given project. How? In order to meet this criteria, we have to demonstrate all the control measures as evidences from our end, starting with the subcontract order, all approved project documents like the design, method statement, shop drawing, QA/QC plan, ITPs, HSE plan. If the materials are under us, then all approved submittals related to materials that will be outsourced. The control measures on outsourced processes, where we have to demonstrate how we are selecting the subcontractors, the material testing processes. While production, the measures taken to control the occurrence of non-conformances, the measures taken while testing the product itself, and the control measures on all the post-production activity. In the earlier version of ISO, this was the product realization phase, with most of the section modified in the current version. Clause number 13. Performance evaluation. This is the checking phase of our business. We had a plan, we executed what we had to do. Now we have to check whether what we did is according to what was planned or not. Here, I would like to indulge the audience, so kindly scroll back to page number 17 of our QMS manual where we have the PDCA chart. Follow the chart, the corresponding clause, and try to recall all that was told in this tape up to clause number 12, and you should understand how to check or evaluate our product outcome. Another way of checking is through the quality audits, where an auditor will be visiting the project site and goes through all the QMS clauses one after the other with a checklist of about 10 pages in his hand and try to find evidences to meet the requirements. It is also recommended by the standard to discuss the performance evaluation during the management review meetings. Clause number 14. Improvement. I would like to explain this clause using a very famous quote which goes like this: to improve, we have to change, but to be perfect, we have to change often. That's what this clause is all about. And with this, I would like to end this QMS session with a very big thank you note to each audience. Because during the time spent for this tape, you probably could have called your dear ones and told how much you love them, or perhaps browsed through the internet to understand how to cut those excess fats and lead a healthy life. But you chose to spend that time with this tape. And this is exactly the most enthusiastic audience I had been looking for, to whom I could hand over all those 25 plus QMS forms and get it evaluated easily. Don't you worry, I'll be at your doorsteps shortly with all those forms. Till then, please accept my best regards.